Today is June 20th, 2025. Have there been any updates on President Trump's statement about birthright citizenship being originally meant only for the children of the slaves? And do you think the Supreme Court will uphold birthright citizenship as it stands or side in Trump's favor?
First of all, it's not a matter of the Supreme Court ruling in Trump's favor. The ruling has already been made, and it was made when it was set up. Okay. A lot of people think they erroneously are misled to believe that anyone born in the United States is a U.S. citizen. That's false. That is a complete and utter fabrication of total untruth. That is not a fact. That is not a fact at all. It says anyone born and under the jurisdiction of the United States is a U.S. citizen, which and people need to comprehend that the birthright citizenship question is on the United States Supreme Court docket. If the justices do their job and examine, meaning do not move on emotion and what everybody's saying and all the rhetoric going on out here right now, if the Supreme Court justices do their due diligence and do their research on how and why this was set up and what was said at the time it was established. This question was asked when they passed that ruling. It was asked and answered and addressed. No, anyone born in the United States is not automatically a citizen just because they were born here. That question was answered and addressed and covered. And if the Supreme Court justices look into it, they're going to find out no, you are not a U.S. citizen just because you were born in the United States. Meaning, if they covered, okay, what about ambassadors? What about this, that? If you are the child of let's say you're an ambassador from Russia or an ambassador from China, your Russian child or Chinese child born here is not a U.S. citizen. And anyone coming in illegally who has a child that's born here is not a U.S. citizen, not in accordance with the way they set it up. Now, if the Supreme Court justices want to rule based on emotions and rhetoric and all the whatever's going on out in the streets, they might do it differently, but that is not the case. They made it very clear that, for example, you are not under people running in, let's say from Mexico. They are under the authority and jurisdiction of Mexico. Running over here does not make them a U.S. citizen because they ran over here. Okay? So what they do is, oh, I'll have a baby here. And now that I've had a baby, my child is a U.S. citizen and you cannot separate me from my child. Okay, well, unfortunately, you were not a U.S. citizen when you ran over here. You were subordinate and under the jurisdiction of Mexico. And so is your child. If somehow you had become under the authority of the United States and then had your child, then your child would follow your status. But you were a Mexican that came in from Mexico or Venezuela or across the border, you walked from China, however you got here. You are still a Chinese national or Mexican national. And just because you had a baby here does not make your baby a U.S. citizen because you yourself are not one. Therefore, your child is not one either, in accordance with the way they set it up when they set this into law, when they etched this into stone. They made it very clear at that time that this is only for the newly freed people. And my people had better understand one or two things right about now on that note. Not every single one of us was under chattel slavery, okay? We were not all brought here from anywhere. And some of us, yes, we are entitled to restitution, restoration, and in some instances, reparations for chattel slavery, but we were not all chattily enslaved, okay? We're not Slavs or Slavoni or whatnot, so we're not slaves, but some of us were enslaved, but not all of us were enslaved. And that's a whole nother interview that I'd have to do at some other date. There are many, many of us that have always been here, and we were never chattel slaves. We were other things. And there are other reasons that they owe us, but not for that reason. And I'm saying that to say, for those of you who were not newly freed people from chattel slavery, which many of us are not freed, our ancestors freed from chattel slavery. But yeah, we did the redlining and the lynching and the destroyed towns and the subdues and the redlining and the what do they call that when you're farming? My ancestors were that. Whatever that farming was, where you would unify with someone white and they would wind up beating you out of your land and everything because, well, you use my bucket, you use my shovel, you use my seeds, whatever. I got to remember what that's called. But there are other reasons why we are old, not just chattel slavery, which we were not all part of that. Those that were not freed from chattel slavery, this don't include you either. So while you keep hollering about you some African in America, you can wind up getting deported too, because the birthright citizenship does not engulf you either. Okay? Now, people better understand a couple of things with this, particularly these people that are tearing up Southern California right now, hollering about my land, my country, we're taking our land back, waving our flags for our land, spitting on the flag for this country. This is an invasion. And you guys have messed up with a lot of people that were supporting you, that were on your side. You know why? You have shut down the Los Angeles, California downtown financial area, and you're interfering with commerce. The United States is a commercial enterprise. It's all about commerce. And you're shutting that down. And even some people that were siding with you, you have lost them. Their support of you is over and they want you gone too now. Because when you do things like shut down a freeway, something melanin rich people have never, ever, ever, ever done. I don't care how many riots we had. I don't care how many peaceful protests that escalated into something else because of other outsider people. We have never gone up on any freeway and shut it down. Never. We would have been shot or run over if we had. Now, there are people who are getting off work or trying to get to work or trying to get to their second job. Some of them are already on write-ups for being late or being absent or too many tardies or whatnot. You've gotten some people fired because they couldn't get to work on time because you shut down the freeways. There are people that are on their way to the hospital with their pregnant wife or some sick child, and you have shut down the hospital, and they're stuck sitting on the freeway and cannot move. Some of these people, the child died in childbirth. Maybe the parent died in childbirth. Maybe the person they were trying to run to the hospital died because you had the freeway shut down. There are people that were on their way to pick up their children from school. Some people, I get off work, I got to go pick up my child. My child gets out, for practice, whatnot, and they're on their way and they're stuck on the freeway because you have shut down the freeway. When you shut down the freeway and you keep a parent from successfully arriving at the school destination to secure their child in a timely fashion, and they can't get there until after dark because, hey, you got the freeway shut down till dark, playing with people's lives, complaining about your lives when your own people voted for this. Okay, your own people voted for this. You were very in support of this particular president. But when it's all said and done, if somebody cannot get to the school to pick their child up, and by the time they finally show up, that child is gone and missing and never seen again, or found dead, or whatever. Cancel that. Make sure you bleep that out because they'll shut down the whole video for that one word. That child is harmed or disappeared because that parent was stuck on the freeway, never to see their child again. You have lost whatever support you have. If I have lost my child and can't find my child because I was stuck on a freeway because of you, you need to think before you act. You are not a U.S. citizen just because you were born here. Because I know a lot of the people out there are the children of illegal immigrants who are complaining about what's happening to their illegal parents. If you don't like it, it's like, oh, you're breaking up families. Well, they've broken up families a lot. They've broken up our families time and time again. Your family can stay together by going home. After all, you love your country. You're waving your country's flag. You're burning this flag. You're spitting on this flag. You're stomping on this flag. You're cursing out the president. You're cursing out law enforcement. And I am no fan of law enforcement. No fan whatsoever, which is why this president did not get my vote this time. You're too gung-ho to law enforcement for me, and they're too mean to my people. But, law enforcement is not really doing much to these people because they are these people. City council is these people, deputies are these people. But this is a federal matter and a federal question. If the United States Supreme Court does its job, you are not a U.S. citizen just because you were born here. If you and I, Nick, are a couple and we are in China on vacation and I am pregnant and I spit my child out over there, that child is not Chinese because they were born in China. We're just there on vacation. We are still under the jurisdiction and authority of the United States. We can't just become Chinese and hang out in China because our child was born there and decide we're going to stay and we're going to wave the U.S. flag and start burning the Chinese flag and spitting on the Chinese flag in China. See how that works out for you. Every country in the world has, every major country in the world has immigration laws in place. This country and a lot of the presidents just haven't been enforcing them to the extent that this president is. But President Obama deported a whole lot of folks. Just saying. The United States Supreme Court needs to read, and everybody else, anybody born here is a U.S. citizen. That is false. Fabrication, misinformation, absolutely not true. That is a lie. Not true, not true, not true, not true, not true. You have to be born here and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. You're subject only to a certain extent. And people better understand, the feds do not require a warrant when they are dealing with what they think is an illegal immigrant. They can talk to you, they can ask you, they can arrest you without a warrant. United States Code Title 8. United States Code Title 8. And anybody that harbors or transports or assists or gets in the way or interferes with the feds doing a federal job with this federal question, you can also be arrested no matter who you are, what your title is, or what you think your authority is, because this is a federal matter. This is not local, city, county, state. This is a federal question. Title 8 United States Code is all about aliens and nationality. Look into section 1324, and that's just one that I can think of off the top of my head. Get out of the way, stay out of the way. You are not a U.S. citizen just because you were born here. You are thoroughly misunderstood and misunderstanding. And if the United States Supreme Court decides against how this was set up, which is not about, siding with Trump or not siding with Trump, it's siding with the law as it was established and laid out and set up to be. You're not a U.S. citizen only because you were born here. It takes more than just that. You're still subjects of your country if you're here illegally. And your children are the same subjects of your country if you're here illegally. They are not subjects of the United States. They just allowed you guys to get away with thinking that. And too many people misunderstand that law, but they better go back and find all the paperwork on that, which the United Supreme Court should read in order to make the decision about it that it was set up to be in the first place. On that note, Harambe.